what is happiness? What does the expectation of happiness look like? Because it's not eradicating negativity or negative events. I mean, that's impossible, but it's how to manage that in a way that brings the most joy to your life and living well with all these other things that are happening to you or with you.
That's Dr. Janna Koretz. She's a licensed psychologist and founder of Azimuth, a therapy practice that specializes in therapy for professionals in high-pressure careers. She spent over a decade helping her clients face and overcome their mental health issues by understanding the industry-specific nuances in fields like law, consulting, finance, and technology. So you'll learn 1, why career enmeshment harms mental health, 2, the power of protected thinking time, and 3, the root cause of workaholism and how to cure it. And if you want a quick summary write-up of these takeaways, I recommend you sign up for the free Gold Nugget email newsletter found at awesomeatyourjob.com. I'm Pete Makaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Dr. Koretz. Dr. Koretz, welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Well, I'm excited to be discussing these very important matters. And I'd love it if you could kick us off with a particularly surprising or novel discovery you've made about us folks in high-pressure careers and mental health things. What's something you know that many of us don't?
Wow, there's so many to choose from. Well, I think a lot of people on a smaller level don't realize how capable they are and how resilient they are and how much they're doing despite all of the struggles that they have. I think people really feel the loss. They feel the pain of their emotional burdens, they feel the stress of work, they feel the burnout, but they don't see it in the background, like the rest of it and all the things that they're doing despite that. They're only feeling, sort of the loss. I think that's also really important to keep in mind for everybody is there's so many strengths and so much to be offered.
Well, tell us, how capable are we?
You guys are so capable. I mean, it's unbelievable, really. And I mean, I think a lot of people who are in high pressure careers are high achievers, and they sort of assume that everyone can do what they're doing and everyone is doing it better and they need to strive to be better and the best and give more, but they don't see how much they've already done. Most people can't do what, the clients that we see, most people can't do a lot of that. It takes a lot of mental effort, a lot of smarts, a lot of emotional energy. So you're very capable from what we see. The most capable.
It's funny that what you're saying sounds very true. And it also sounds very easy to dismiss and to shoo away. And instead of allowing to truly sink in and allow the good mental health vibes that it can deliver to us be delivered. Is that fair to say? How do people respond when you share this truth with them?
Oh, absolutely. That's true. It's so dismissed. It can be so easily dismissed, partly because people, are not used to receiving compliments, because the way in which our culture works now is we're always looking for what's wrong and no one's saying great job or things like that, especially in the workplace, especially in a fast-paced workplace. So I think that's part of it. And I think that people often feel awkward about that because it's so dissonant to what they believe that they kind of brush it off because it just doesn't really serve them in the moment, when really it serves them in the long term.
So if we do want to sort of brush that aside, like, yeah, okay, sure, okay, I guess I got some good grades and, I got some lucky breaks and okay, so it worked out. So, okay, I'm here and yeah, okay, fair enough. I guess maybe statistically, the majority of people couldn't exactly pull off what I've pulled off. So fair enough. But I mean, you know what? There's millions of people just like me. So like, is it really that special?
Are you really that special? Interesting question. Well, think about it this way. So it's not really about being special. It's about having a great capability and applying that in a way that's useful to you. And so a lot of people have kind of gone through life and checked all the boxes that whatever they're supposed to do, the expectations they were supposed to meet, they're kind of on this treadmill and they're not necessarily thinking about it. But that's a lot of effort and a lot of work. And so if you find yourself in a place where you're burnt out, yes, you need to get away from the burnout to have access to those resources. But you're like, these people are very capable. You're a very capable person. If you use that energy and direct it towards what's helpful to you and figure out what that is, then, I mean, that's the dream, right? And I had a client once who was like, my boyfriend says it's kind of like people who do like these complicated scams. And, they have these, right? It's like these really complicated scams. And if only they could apply that to like curing cancer, wouldn't that be cool? Like that's so much effort and it's smart in some ways, right? They're getting around all these things. They're using AI, I mean, just not for good. But if you could harness that and apply it somewhere else, that would be pretty great.
Yeah. So when you say the power, you mean our own capability to dream, to imagine, to figure out, to come to believe things? Is that what you mean by the capabilities and the scams?
I mean, partly. I mean, certainly the internal piece, but also just the work, the actual energy and the mental effort and the multitasking that people do on a daily basis. I mean, just it's the inside and the output too is a lot. And it could be directed in a lot of different ways.
I suppose what I'm really driving at is if it is a master key to understand and believe that we have vast capabilities, and it feels like it is that your assertion as well?
I think it's an important thing to acknowledge for a lot of reasons, yes.
So if that's one key factor, but we're quick to brush it off and to not allow it to sink in and enrich us, do you have any pro tips on how we can get there? Because what I'm thinking about is if I truly believe deep down in my heart of hearts that I have vast stores of capability, not that I'm sort of omniscient or the most brilliant person who ever lived, but vast stores of capability, then it would seem like it would naturally follow a sense of peace could emerge. And thinking, hey, you know what? Wow, yeah, there's a lot of challenges out there, but they are ultimately figure outable because I'm pretty good at figuring things out and handling the things that life throws my way. So that seems to me very, very powerful to have that as an internal mental health asset. But if we shoo it away, we don't have it. And that's sad. How can we get it?
Well, the first question I always ask is why? Why can't you access that? Why don't you believe that? What is hard about that? And that's the whole, we spend a lot of time in therapy doing that. So that's not a simple question. But also, a lot of people's inability to appreciate and believe in themselves and their capabilities is because they don't have a grounded sense of who they are. They don't have a grounded sense of their identity anymore, or their identity is like wrapped up in one thing, work, motherhood, something like that. And people lose themselves. So they don't feel steady and saying, yeah, like I do have these abilities and capabilities because I just don't feel like I do those things anymore, or I just do them ad nauseum. So it just feels like everybody has them. So I think a lot of it has to do with really finding your identity again and really knowing who you are.
Working with a lot of folks in high pressure careers, what are some of the themes or patterns you see over and over and over again with regard to their mental health that we should be clued into and aware of?
Well, I think career enmeshment for our people is huge, which is just their whole identity is wrapped up in their career. And so inevitably when something happens at work, like they don't miss a promotion, their company gets acquired, they get laid off and things like that, they don't have any part of themselves to fall back on. And you're made very uncomfortable by that because it brings up a lot of existential questions like, who am I? What was the point of that? What am I even doing here? And people can get really upset about that and kind of fall into more of an anxiety, have a lot of anxiety, depression, start using substances and things like that. That's a really big one.
Okay. Our identity is wrapped up in our career. I'm reminded of a couple of things here. One is personally, I remember once I in fact got a mediocre review, mediocre to bad at work. And I was so surprised and stunned and puzzled. And I remember I actually said out loud, this doesn't feel like who I am. And I thought, and I later reflected, like, what an interesting reaction. Because of course it's not who I am. It is
That's
one review. One
Yes.
review. But there it is. And then I'm also thinking about, I think it was Ronda Rousey, the fighter, was interviewed. And it was very emotional and powerful. She was crying because she lost a huge match or championship. And she said something like, if I'm not a champion, then who am I? And I was like, oh man, Rhonda, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down there from that experience I had previously. So that's kind of what it sounds like what career enmeshment might look, sound, feel like. These kinds of reactions to normal career, hiccups and setbacks that happen to us all.
Yeah, I mean, she said it perfectly. And I think it can apply to other things too. Like one metaphor we use a lot, right, it's for parents in general, but there's a lot of talk about motherhood and loss of identity because you're all consumed into this one thing. And that can be applied, being enmeshed in anything or with anyone is totally possible. So it happens a lot in the workplace. And we see it a lot too with our clients who used to be athletes and they spent a really long time, like all of their time really perfecting their craft, getting really good. Maybe they've made it, they're doing Olympic trials, they're doing all sorts of stuff, and then they get injured. And then they have then what, right? Kind of like Rhonda was saying, then what? What do I have? Who am I? And what we see a lot too is because people have spent coming up so much time with that from an early age. Sports is a great example, but it could be anything. You spend a lot of time through your childhood playing. I always use soccer as an example, but it could be anything, that you're missing out on critical developmental periods where you're supposed to be doing other things like learning social skills with friends, like the nuances of social skills, or taking small risks to learn about your independence and confidence and learning how to make choices, things like that. And so because you're siloed into this one thing and in a very sort of constructed environment with rules. And so within that context, people can get creative and learn those things, but the world is a much bigger place. So then you find yourself in a place where you don't have that anymore, and you don't feel prepared or equipped to navigate what's in front of you because you haven't had the practice that a lot of people have had to figure that out. And it makes sort of like adds on to the burden of who am I, what am I doing, because it makes people flounder a little bit.
All right. So if some folks are nodding their heads like, oh my gosh, yes, that's me. What do we do about it?
What a big question. I love coming on podcasts as people ask these big questions, and they're so complicated. But we start out a lot of times doing values-based work, like what is actually important to you, because oftentimes we don't live in a culture that promotes that. I mean, certainly when I grew up, nobody asked me what was important to me. I was just expected by my family and the culture that I was in to do certain things and be certain ways and achieve certain stuff. And I did it because I didn't think much about it. And then as I got older and life happens to you and stuff, whatever, you just get wiser with age. I started to realize that what I was doing wasn't actually what would make me happy. And what does make me happy. And it took me a long time to figure that out. And that's what we do a lot with our clients. What is it that makes you happy? How far are you from that? And how do you start to incrementally get to that place or add that into your life? Because you can't most people, right, can't just quit their job, or they can't just move to wherever. I think there's this idea of one of the exercises we do is, without any constraints, what would your life look like? And people have like things that are very far often from where they are. And they think they just have to go to that place. But really, that's not reality. Reality is still important too. But we can slowly start to figure out how to turn in that direction, how to enter into that lane. And if we can get there, great. But like, what if we could get 70% there? That's still much better than 0%. And so it's kind of like working in that gray area. But I think values-based work is the crux of so many things.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. When you say values work, I'm thinking we had Dr. Stephen Hayes on the show.
Yes.
And
yes.
In his book, the phrase values work comes up many a time. So when you say values-based work or values work, what does that mean and how does one do it?
Well, I have to give a plug for him because he is the nicest person of all time.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And his work is incredible. And what he spent his life doing is incredible for all of the ACT workbooks and the books that come with that. I mean, it's really changed the face of therapy. And he is just a delightful person. So we talk about him a lot. And I do send people to some of his literature and his workbooks because they're so accessible and they're so true of sitting down and doing those exercises. I mean, that would be a more formal way of how we would start that. But some of the sort of self-reflecting questions we can talk about, like the one that I just talked about, what would your life look like without this? Who do I admire? Why do I admire them? What about that makes me want to be that way? There are a lot of like sort of questions you can ask yourself that start to help people think about things in that way. Or you can do more formalized, values-based work through ACT, which I recommend to people all the time. I love it. I think it's great.
Well, those are great questions. And can you lay a few more of those on us?
Okay, let's see. Who do you admire? Oh, what would you do if someone gave you, $40 million? How would you spend it?
I love the specific figure there.
Well, it has to be so big that, whatever you can.
Right. It's not billions. It's not 1 million. It's ample.
That's right.
It's not yacht money, but it could be, I guess. But it's like retirement plus money.
Right. Because like billions, it's like, then you're going to space and like, that's not the sphere that we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're going to bring it down a little bit, but there can't be any restraint. So that's one we do a lot. I also like to talk about like, who are your favorite people to spend time with? And another one we talk a lot about is if you could spend more time with your family, why would you not do that?
Mm-hmm.
And so those are some other questions to kind of start thinking about what is important and what do I value and how do I want to go about that, like incorporating that into my life.
Okay. And we've had some guests who talk a little bit about values as sort of a thing almost to be discovered and codified, like joy and discovery. And so that's one way we could think about values. Or do you have a recommendation on a codification or documentation or ratification or a writing it down official thing associated with the outcome of this values exploration?
I love that you asked that because it's so relevant to a project that I've been working on. So on our website, we sort of changed Shalom Schwartz's Values Navigator a little bit to fit our clientele a little bit more. But his work is really great. And that kind of goes through, it's just a little quiz. It's actually one of our most popular pages on our website. Thousands of people do it a day. So I think there is something in there that people really feel connected to. And that kind of puts you into some categories. And what we are doing actually is it's all public beta should be out in a couple of weeks, but private beta is being sorted now. It's a values-based journaling app called Clearly. And that is a way in which we have people journal and see how in line they are with their values. And we also are incorporating prompts from various people like myself or other experts in various industries to kind of help people prompt them to write more about how that works and what it's going to look like. And are they living in alignment? Why are I not? So it's going to be pretty neat.
Cool. All right. So there's some assessments you could take, and that's handy. Thank you. And some journaling, and all of these is sort of, let's see, how do I say this? Is there an end point, or is it continuous? And how do we know we're starting to reap the benefits or rewards of the values work?
I think you know when you know because you feel grounded and you feel happy. And I think that's another thing to think about too. And part of this conversation is, what is happiness? What does that look like? What does the expectation of happiness look like? Because it's not eradicating negativity or negative feelings or anything like that, or negative events. I mean, that's impossible. But it's how to manage that in a way that brings the most joy to your life and living well with all these other things that are happening to you or with you or things like that. So that's what I would say about that, I guess. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Happiness is not eradicating all unpleasant experience. And boy, if you make that your goal, that's going to be a bummer.
It's way more attainable to know that you can't figure out how to live most of the time pretty well with all this heavy stuff around you, because that's just what being an adult is. I've come to learn myself. That's just what it is.
Okay. So maybe could you share with us perhaps a story or two of transformation so we can get a picture of, okay, I'm experiencing a career enmeshment. I have not yet done the values work. And then I do the values work, and this is what it looked like. And this is what I discovered, and then how I live differently. And then what's the before after profiles.
So, I think running a business and being a psychologist lays the groundwork for being enmeshed in your career and kind of being on a treadmill that you know why you're there, but it's so easy to get caught in the weeds, anything else you're intensely into, and doing what is needed to complete task and to achieve whatever the goal is. You have to check off some boxes. You have to jump through hoops. You have to do all these things, right? And you do become secondary. What you want becomes secondary because you're working on these projects that are bigger than you are. Or for a business, right? It's like now other people rely on you to pay for stuff and support their families, right? It's like, that's a really big responsibility. And over time, even though I knew that's what I loved. I love all of that. I love to help people. I love to run the business. I love all of that. It felt so negative to me. I think probably 8 years in, I was just feeling maybe a little burnt out, but just the joy of it had sort of passed by. And I just really wasn't sure. It was a little confusing, to be honest. And it's funny, right? Because we do all this work with other people, but all therapists have their own therapists because you cannot do the work by yourself. It's impossible. And so through my own therapy, kind of figuring out that the things that it wasn't that I didn't like what I was doing anymore, it's just that I didn't have the other things that I was missing from previous parts of my life. So it's not that I didn't want to be a psychologist anymore. I didn't like running the business, because I did. It's just I couldn't only do that and be a happy person. That's just for me, that was not something that went together. So then figuring out what it is that you can realistically add back in is tricky, right? Because at the time I had a full caseload of clients and I was running the business. Like, when exactly was I supposed to, strap on my shoes and go for a run, things like that. But time can be made. And this is a strategy I tell people to do all the time. So I kind of went back to people that I had known from a long time ago and just reconnected with them. I didn't necessarily tell them about what was going on with me or anything, but I remember at the time telling my husband, like, I used to be funny. I used to be a really funny person. Who remembers me when I was funny? And kind of like going back in time, and those people you've known from before remember those parts of you vividly, and they kind of bring that out for you. And so then you can start to remember, like, oh yeah, this does feel like me. This is kind of where I'm at. And it took a long time in doing that and feeling uncomfortable because I was leaving unanswered emails on my computer at 6:45 at night, so I could go to the gym or something occasionally or something like that. I feel like I built out by doing more more diverse activities and more things, having more things in my life. I actually enjoyed all of my life more. And I really got back into like the flow of the business and feeling really good about it and things like that. So that's not like a dramatic transformation in that, like, I didn't go from being like a sailor to, running McKinsey or something like that. But I think this is the kind of transformation our clients experience. Is they're not necessarily going to quit their job and go to the Bahamas and start an ice cream shop. That's not really even the point. But it's to realize what you're missing and become whole again as a person and with your identity. And that's what brings people joy, is like feeling good about incorporating those different pieces in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so then could you share a little bit of some of the questions or exercises or things you did that unearthed some of these insights? Like, hey, I used to be funny. What happened to that? Or, oh, shucks, I'm not exercising nearly enough as to feel great.
I think part of what I learned too about myself, and I think this is true for our clients also, is there's like not really time to sit and think, period. Like, just end stop, right? It's like, we're constantly like, we're driving, we're doing laundry, we're just like doing too many things at once. And I always found that when I just did nothing, quote unquote, and was thinking, that's actually when my best ideas would come about work or other things in my life. But it just feels really silly to do it because you're basically just staring into space. It doesn't feel like it's something that you're allowed to do. So honestly, right? So I was prescribed by my own therapist to sit around and just stare into space and think about stuff. And that's what I did. And it was so uncomfortable in the moment. Like, I hated it so much because at first all I could do, it's like when people start to learn to meditate, right? So all they can think about is their laundry list of things that they're not doing. But over time, I got pretty good at thinking and using that time to figure out those bigger questions and asking myself, oh, I thought about that. I wonder why that happened, and kind of have my own stream of consciousness that kind of led me there. So I think protected thinking time is super important. It's not like a shiny piece of advice, but it's a good one.
Well, I think it's actually fairly shiny, if I may be so bold. I've heard 1,000-ish guests share many nuggets. And what I love about that is the distinction you drew between the thinking we're doing. It's even better than thinking while driving and thinking while doing the laundry. It's completely uninterrupted. And that's rather, well, it sounds delightful to me, because a lot of times I think, I read these studies on, meditation is so beneficial, I should do the meditation. It's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do that because I suppose I'm supposed to, because of all the rewards and the optimal, benefits versus costs, And sometimes it just really hits the spot and it's great. But other times it's like, well, no, what I really want to do is think about anything and everything and wherever. And it's, in a way, it's like there's a little bit of a stressor in that there's always something happening. Even if it's low level, like taking a shower or driving, there's always sort of something occurring. And so having protected thinking time is a fundamentally different practice than a mindfulness meditation return to the breath. But it is I guess there's like a Venn diagram overlap. It has some restorative goodness the way that does, and yet it's a distinct activity.
Yes, I would agree with that. And even now I try to do that. I go into Boston, into the office at least once a week, which is a little bit far from where I live. And I I do take the train now because the walk from the train station to my office is about a half hour. And I feel bad. My dog is the therapy dog for our office, and I often bring her to the office, but there are days where I don't. And my husband's always like, why just bring the dog? Like, she's just there. She's a great companion. I'm like, I can't have to think about anything else during that time or anybody else. Like, she's going to stop. The people are going to pet her. She's going to have to go to the bathroom, all this. I don't want to listen to a podcast. I just want to be sort of like by myself and not have to answer to anybody, sort of. And I love the dog and I bring her all the time, but there are just some days where I feel like I know that I need that protected time. And so I don't bring her, which makes her a little sad, which then makes me a little sad. So then we don't do it that often, but that's how I kind of do that because anything feels like a huge interruption to me during that time now.
Now, for you personally, like how long are these sessions here?
Well, that walk's a half hour there and back. So that's an hour in one day. But then I won't do it for a couple of weeks. So Thursdays or Fridays a crazy day. And then I can find some time on Saturday. So I kind of fit it in where I can. And there are just some days where I know that it's going to be stressful to try to find that time. So I don't do it on those days necessarily. But, probably every other day, every 3 days for at least cumulatively, maybe an hour.
That's cool. Well, and I'm also thinking about, is it Bill Gates famously just had his Think Weeks where I don't know if it's annually or so, he just disappears with a bunch of books and Diet Cokes into a cabin somewhere.
Yeah, he's got like a house on an island, doesn't he?
And then he's just thinking. And so that seemed to work out pretty well for him. And it's working out pretty well for you. So tell us what sorts of, it sounds like you don't even have an agenda. And by design, there's no questions to be thought of, just rolling.
Mm-hmm. I mean, every so often, I will think about one thing and use that time to do that. But mostly it's just wherever the wind blows, that's where we go. And it's always very helpful. I always get something out of it at the end.
And do you have a notebook with you?
No.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll write down the idea. Well, that's the thing too. I mean, not everyone operates the same, right? Some people might have a recorder or record stuff on the phone, or they might take notes after or have a journal while they're doing it. I mean, occasionally I'll write something down if it's really important. And I don't know, I feel like I have to write it down, but most of the time I remember those things because they kind of come to me in this aha moment and I just don't forget them.
And what I also love about that is sometimes I think, and then I'm so excited by the thing I thought about, I want to go immediately explore it. Mm-hmm. Let's go see if that already exists, if that's available, if I could go buy it or whatever.
Yes.
It's well, maybe I'll just write that down and continue the thinking.
Or if you're excited by it, then I usually write it down because inevitably my time is up or I've gotten to the office and I have other things to do. But I always, it's good to come back to that stuff too.
Okay. Well, this is fun. Thank you for indulging me with that deep dive. Let's hear a little bit about stress in the midst of high pressure careers. What are your top pro tips, do's and don'ts for deal with that?
Well, my advice is never, I guess shiny is a good word, but I think people always want this really great advice they never heard of before. And I have a little bit of that because I think what we all know what we're supposed to be doing. And this is kind of what happens to a lot of our clients when they come to our office. A lot of them have been to therapy before. And they go there and the therapist says, well, you need to work less. You need to eat more vegetables. You got to sleep more, all the things. They already know that, but they can't do it because of all the reasons. And so it feels a little invalidating. If that's the way you're supposed to manage stress, then, and I can't do that logistically, then therefore I cannot manage stress. Then there's my situation is hopeless. And not to say that other therapists are bad or anything, these are all things that we're telling people are important. But if you're in a high pressure career, there's a lot of nuances that just don't allow for the same kinds of flexibility that other people might have. There's deadlines, there are clients, there are acquisitions, there's all these things. People are raising money, they have investors that they're answering to and all of that. So do I think sleeping more is important? Yes. Do I wish I could sleep more? Yes. Do I think everyone should sleep more? Absolutely. But I know that getting an extra hour of sleep for people is a really big ask. So I think if you can think about those common things that we all know about, sleep, eating, stuff like that, exercise, I think being creative is actually the way to go about it, and think about creative ways to implement those things and not sort of the prescribed way in which everybody seems to be doing it. The example I always give is a lot of our clients, when they start exercising again, they sign up for a triathlon or a marathon or something like that because that feels like the right thing to do for them. But that's not a sustainable choice most of the time. Occasionally it is, but most of the time it's not. And if you can get creative and be okay with something that doesn't fit into sort of the box or what you expected exercise should be looking like, then that's actually where the success comes from. And there are these small sort of incremental changes of adding those things in are all fine and all really important. And they help with like a mindset shift, because a lot of times like the initiation is the hard part. And showing yourself that you can do things differently is the hard part, because especially people who've been in like the same kind of routine for a while, like starting to cook, like it's awkward, it's really hard to start to do that. And so being sort of expecting that and knowing that's part of the process and being okay with that is important. And I think it's kind of interesting too, because, people like all of us, right? We're always looking to sort of optimize. And so we're trying to look like, what is the eating plan? What is a good exercise thing so I can lift and gain muscle and be strong and all these things. But oftentimes we make them really complicated, and it doesn't have to be that complicated, and it doesn't have to be that prescribed. I mean, if your goal is to eat more home cooked meals and you cook once a week on a Saturday, like that's great, right? You've done it now. It doesn't have to be that now you're scratch cooking and meal prepping all week on a Sunday and spending your whole Sunday doing that. So that's kind of like the first section of advice I give people, is kind of reorienting them to what's possible in those kind of common domains that we know about, and also to get creative about it. I mean, there's all sorts of interesting ways to incorporate those things. I mean, maybe not sleep, because then you're just asleep, right? I mean, you can put in naps and stuff like that. But I mean, there's like 1,000 different ways to exercise, and a lot of them can be done in your house without any equipment, and so just kind of figuring out what that looks like, I think, is important. So that's where we start usually. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's a strong place to start.
Yeah. Well, I think it's handy in terms of, I think that's like a top don't with regard to stress management is don't just look at the moon and stars, like the utmost perfect exercise plan, the perfect amount of sleep. Oh, yes, I should be sleeping 7 to 9 hours every night in complete darkness and silence, with a bed that's dynamically adjusting its temperature for me. They haven't sponsored the show yet. I mean, we'll see. But it's like, okay, well, that's beyond my reach, so just forget it all. But rather, it's like, okay, well, what is creative, what is realistic, and what's fine in terms of exercise or getting some more sleep, whatever, that's really nifty. So then it sounds like with regard to the shiny advice, you don't have one weird trick to instantly calm down, but rather, hey, just do the little stress relieving things we all know about in reasonable, approachable proportions.
Yes, I think a lot of that ties back into sort of black and white thinking. You're right. It's like it has to be all of it or none of it. And like we're all kind of predisposed to that for various reasons, but the gray is fine. Like good enough is excellent. And if you're just looking to change your behavior to make new habits and also gain those advantages from doing all that stuff, it doesn't have to be wild times. So yeah, don't do the big things. And also, if you're looking to calm down, don't tell people to calm down. That's another don't, right? Don't do that.
Super. And if we find ourselves in the workaholic mode, what are your tips there? If we are in a zone where it's like, I have to do this, or I just am having so much fun, work it away for 12, 13 plus hours a day. I imagine this comes up frequently with your folks in high pressure careers. How do you advise them?
I think you have to think about what motivates you in life and what makes you happy, right? It comes back to the value stuff again a little bit, where there are people who work all the time and they're happy, and that's fine. You know what I mean? Think about like a lot of physicians spend a lot of time at the hospital, and they really they don't love 36 hours on call, but they enjoy their job, and they're not going to necessarily quit their job because they really like what they do. I know a lot of people do like coding, right? They get into the zone, they're coding with their headphones on, and then like somehow like 8 hours passes, but that's what makes them happy. They like to build stuff. They like to be creative. So keep in mind too, like it's not always bad to have a couple of days or kind of like a job where you're working all the time. It's when it gets in your way and when it causes you distress. And then you have to sit and figure out what it is, why that is, like what makes you happy, what doesn't make you happy, how do you want to spend your time, what is motivating to you? Because a lot of times when you ask those questions, it starts out being really obvious. Well, I'm motivated because I want to do a good job. Okay, well, why do you want to do a good job? Because I want to make money. Okay, why do you want to make money? Because I want to be able to buy all this stuff. Okay, why do you want to buy all that stuff? And you keep, going through all those lines of questioning, it usually comes down to something like because anxiety or fear-based, because I didn't have money growing up, because I'm afraid I won't have it. I'm afraid if I don't make it now, I won't have it later. I have a family to support. I want to support my parents as they age and things like that. Or people don't really have a good answer for that. And that's important too, to know if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, then that's a whole other conversation. So the line of inquiry is also incredibly important to kind of figure out what it is you're doing and why you're doing it and why you're working so much.
Big thanks to Dr. Koretz for sharing her wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Lingoda. Years ago, I tried learning Spanish, but stopped within weeks because I was all alone, just me and the software. That's why I recommend Lingoda, which offers live, affordable online language learning lessons in small group classes. My teacher, Ricardo, was so friendly and patient, and there are only 3 of us in the class, so we get to interact and speak Spanish with live feedback from the instructor. And there's never been a better time to try Lingoda. Sign up for the 7-day trial and attend 3 small group classes or 1 private class completely free. This Black Friday, all language courses are discounted up to 50%, and the last day to claim this offer is December 9th. To claim this offer, go to try.lingoda.com/awesome and use the promo code AWESOME50. That's try.lingoda.com/awesome. Their Black Friday deal is the best it's ever been, so now is the finest of times to learn that language at try.lingoda.com/awesome. One sponsor to check out is Jenny Kane. The holiday season is officially upon us, and Jenny Kane is a top destination for the very best of all things festive and gifting. They've got a handy gift guide that makes it oh so easy to check off everyone on your list. Jenny Kane has luxurious cashmere pieces, such as my all-time favorite hoodie that I am wearing right now as I record this, and tasteful homeware pieces, such as their legendary candles. Their coats are also super adorable and cozy and a great answer to the cold temperatures approaching. Finally, check out Jenny's Edits, which provides favorites under $250 and lists out handy gift-giving categories. For a limited time, How to Be Awesome at Your Job listeners get 15% off your first order when you use the code AWESOME15 at checkout. Now that's on top of their 10% rewards back rewards program. So to get 15% off your first order, visit JENNIKAYNE, JennyKane.com, and use the promo code AWESOME15 at checkout. One sponsor to check out is LinkedIn Jobs. Did you know that you can post a job for free at linkedin.com/beawesome? And with a fresh year, perhaps you're like many small business owners looking for some fresh insight and talent to make 2024 extra amazing. Well, LinkedIn Jobs has created tremendous tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and free. I love how they make it so easy with their promotion and selection tools. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. No. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Here's some fun facts. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours, and small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/beawesome. That's linkedin.com/BEAWESOME, as in you are being awesome, be awesome, to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Okay. Well, now could you share a favorite quote? Something you find inspiring.
I have to tell you, in general, I'm not a quotes person, but I will share a piece of advice that's kind of a quote that I do like and I follow, which is one of my supervisors a long time ago. I was working in a long-term adolescent inpatient unit. It was a state hospital. And there's just a lot of chaos that comes with that in terms of even just the systems issues. And I was complaining one day about well, it's the answer's so obvious. Why are they doing it this way? The administration, this, that, and the other. And she was like, Janna, you got to play by the rules to change the rules. I was like, yeah. I'm not in a position right now to change the rules, but I could be one day if I play by the rules and check the boxes and get to the place where I need to be to make the change. I thought that was kind of an interesting way of thinking about things.
And a favorite study or experiment or bit of research?
It's a controversial thing now, but I did like the Stanford prison experiment a lot. Not because I think it was a great idea, but I think it really showed dynamics around people and pressure and power that I think are really important that we should be talking about and thinking more about.
And a favorite book?
Maybe controversial to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. I loved Coddling of the American Mind.
Oh, yeah. Jonathan Haidt. All right. And a favorite tool?
Boundary setting.
Okay. And a favorite habit?
Waking up before everybody else.
All right. And is there a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks? They quote back to you often?
I think what maybe I might be known for is asking why, maybe a little too much, but for the purpose of really getting people to think about things and wonder why things are the way they are. Like, why do we need to do this way? And this is true. I feel this way about therapy in general and psychology in general and just the way the industry is.
And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where would you point them?
Our website is where we keep all the things. So azimuthpsych.com, AZIMUTH psych. That's where the burnout calculator, career enmeshment test, the values navigator are, all of the things we do, the people we see, other things that we like, that we share, other resources, where we've been in the media, things we've written about, stuff like that. It's all in one place.
Okay. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
You can't think about it too much. Sometimes you just have to do it and see what happens.
All right. Dr. Koretz, thank you. This is fun. And I wish you much joy.
Thank you. You as well.
I have been thinking a lot about Dr. Koretz's perspective on what is our expectation of happiness, and it is certainly not the eradication of negativity or negative events. And I think that's so handy to get clear on what's a realistic, worthy expectation to strive for, and then go for that, and not to get discouraged by something that doesn't really exist. Great stuff from Dr. Koretz. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1016. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.